Hi, you're watching special coverage of Russia's war on Ukraine here on Power and Politics. I'm Vashi Kapelos, and tonight I'm in Rzeszów, Poland, about an hour away from the Ukrainian border. In our reporting here, we've become really curious about one thing, and that is, how is aid and help being delivered to Ukraine, and how are people getting out of Ukraine? Because of Russia's assault in the country, it has become really, really difficult to do so. There are very few humanitarian corridors open, for example, and because this was not a war zone, all of these aid agencies, all of these people offering some help have had to start from the bottom up and build the infrastructure to do so over the last 6 weeks. To find out more about how exactly it happens, what the logistics are, what the challenges are, we met up with a man named Jason Brisebois. He's a former Canadian Forces member. He was involved in the airlift that took kids with cancer from Ukraine over to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. When we spoke to him, he had just come back from delivering these supplies. I believe we have some pictures of them. Supplies to a children's hospital in Ukraine and coming back to the other side, to the Polish side. As I said, we met up with him at the border to find out more about how exactly that can even happen in the middle of a war.
They gave me a call on the 8th of March and asked me to come down and help establish an Airbridge between Poland and Canada. And 48 hours later, I was on the ground in Krakow.
In layman's terms, what's an Airbridge?
An Airbridge is providing flight resources between Poland and Canada, being able to fly patients, the children with cancer, from Poland to Canada.
And you were involved with that.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about what that was like.
That was one of the most complicated logistical operations I've ever been part of. It was a huge effort, and none of it would have been possible without the team from Reticle backing me up. In 18 days, I flew 8,000 plus kilometers over 6 time zones, drove 3,500 kilometers through 3 different countries, met with NGOs, various safe houses, and different entities operating on the Polish and Ukrainian side. Negotiated with police forces, armies, border guards, coordinated with governments, Canadian entities, Canadian agencies as well.
And just yesterday, actually, you just came back from your last.
And it was also my birthday yesterday, incidentally.
happy belated birthday. And what did that involve? My understanding is you were basically taking supplies to a children's hospital in Lviv, which we know was struck twice over the weekend.
Yes, it was. Yes, we had a private donor who wanted to make a big and an immediate impact. And so he purchased a number of medical supplies for a children's hospital in Lviv, and we were able to work together to get them across the border. And none of that would have been possible without the help of other Canadian service providers on the ground. CanAid Logistics and Raven Ray Consultancy were critical to the success of that mission.
If you could describe for us, I mean, you've explained how complicated it is, but for us who have not been in a conflict zone, for the viewers at home, what did yesterday involve? How does it typically roll out?
Yesterday involved getting across the border, which is probably the most challenging part of it. Obviously, Poland and Ukraine are very concerned with who and what is moving across the border right now. There are people out there who want to take advantage of situations like this. So they're at a very, very heightened level of security at the borders. So getting across the border was about an hour and a half, 2-hour process going in and coming out. Searches, checkpoints, passport checks, everything. Once we got across the border into Ukraine, then you're negotiating with the multiple checkpoints, army checkpoints along the way, again, controlling and regulating who and what is getting into a war zone. And
you have been in other war zones. You have done this for a number of years. You have a background in the Canadian Forces. Mm-hmm. How does this conflict, this war, compare to your experiences in other places?
It's a great question. This is pretty much on par for what happens from what I've experienced before in Afghanistan, for example. We ran into moving around the city, getting aid in and out, doing our military operations was very much a very similar feel to this.
And what about the logistics involved? You talked a little bit how complicated is this? Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it's more complicated than other places? What's unique?
It's more complicated right now because we're at the beginning of this conflict. As time goes on, as this is repeated over and over again, systems will be put in place, processes will be put in place to make it a smoother transition in and out.
And do you feel like, is your sense after being here for more than 3 weeks that they are looking at a protracted war?
I'm the last person to ask on this. That's more of a political, strategic question. I'm the guy on the ground just making things happen as best and as fast as we can.
Let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
After being on the ground, is your sense that those services, that aid is going to be needed in the long run?
I believe it will be, and I believe those services and those NGOs are prepared to make this, to be here as long as it takes.
I know it's your job, but if I could ask you to kind of personally reflect a little bit on what you've seen. I mean, you have been up and close with kids who need help, who are sick, not just the ones that flew to Canada, but the ones who are going to be using the supplies that you essentially risked your life to get to them.
Right.
Why is it important to you? What is it like to see, I mean, at the heart of this war, like kids who are in trouble?
It's heartbreaking. It's to see the families, to see the mothers coming out, single mothers, because all the fathers have to stay behind, coming out with their children, reducing their lives, their existences to a carry-on case of possessions. That's it. It's heartbreaking to see, and it's heartbreaking to see, to know what's happening in Europe. I mean, this has happened before. History is repeating itself, unfortunately. And the last 2 times this happened, it didn't end well for anyone. This is something that everyone should be concerned with.
Is that a reality that you've seen up close too? The fact that at the end of the day, there is really no, quote unquote winner, right? Like we've already seen the death, we've already seen the destruction. It just keeps getting worse.
It is, yeah. The only people, there are no winners in war. Everyone loses.
And when you think about the role here of, people like you, but also private donations. Like I think there's this sense of frustration among Canadians, like how can we help? What can we do? Obviously there's, public channels to go through, but there is a whole apparatus, it seems, from what I understand, right?
There is,
going
yes.
on behind the scenes that you're involved with. What would you tell Canadians about that?
One of the things that I've encountered personally is a lot of my friends, a lot of my family friends and my circle have felt a sense of frustration about not being able to do enough. Not being able to be on the ground and get their hands and feet dirty doing something concrete. And I get it, I understand that, but that's fine, that's okay. Not everyone can and not everyone should be on the ground doing this. And the reality is the people like me, people on the ground doing it, need the people back home, need the back end support. None of what I'm doing would be possible without their support and without their donations and what they can do from their homes.
And has your background in the Canadian Forces, like how did that prepare you for the job that you do now?
The training, the mindset, the ability to go into a conflict zone, the ability to pivot and change direction in any direction at a moment's notice is something that we were trained to do, in my specific unit especially, to adapt and overcome and move forward with minimal resources, making the largest impact possible.
Do you ever get nervous still doing something like this?
Not here, not now. Everyone gets nervous. Everyone gets scared. Eventually, I don't think anyone who says otherwise is probably hiding something. But we all get nervous. We all get scared eventually. For me personally, this specific operation, not really. But if the threat level was to increase, yes, I definitely would be.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jason. Real pleasure to meet you. Appreciate it. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.